amount of experience and work happening in all these communities that you're involved in, and that's gives me a lot of interest in learning from your experience as well. And so, Herman, thank you also for connecting us for this opportunity. I know, Herman, you've spent some time over there in Egypt working, but I know you more as a Philadelphia guy. In fact, I met Herman, I don't know, 8 years ago, and we walked some of the toughest streets in Philadelphia together, and went into lots and lots of the small businesses, and everybody knew Herman. Everybody respected him. Everybody had benefited from his work with them in the previous couple years. And that's my ultimate and only test, honestly, of is this a person that is authentic and that we want to work with. In other words, if you have credibility on the street with these folks in these communities, that's 100% the test, because these communities, I'm sure is true in your country as well as here, have been left behind so often, have been shut out of opportunities so often, and are disadvantaged for all sorts of reasons and in many different ways. And when a person like Herman or like yourselves sort of becomes part of the community, becomes trusted by them, and respected by them, and looked to for help and for resources, that's the whole equation here. That's the whole goal that we have in our work too. So all of you are in that category, I know. So it's good to be with colleagues like that. The Neighborhood Development Center, we're 30 years old as an organization. We have about a fifth as many, well, less than that. We have 35 employees, so we're nothing like you guys in terms of size. But we have worked in the lowest income neighborhoods of Minneapolis and St. Paul with the goal of connecting with low to very low income people who operate in the informal economy. Here we call it the underground economy, and have a skill and have a passion for their skill. And it might be working on cars. It might be cutting hair, or cooking, or taking care of children, or writing. I don't know what. But these are communities where nobody really have role models for how do you bring that business above ground? How do you formalize that business? Because their families don't have that in their background. There either are no businesses active in those communities, or they're owned by people from outside. And so our goal for 30 years has been to connect with those people, to gain their trust, and then to develop them into real businesses. And then to keep those businesses in their own community, so that over time, their own communities, their whole neighborhoods start to change and start to improve, and have both a stronger economy, but also stronger social networks, because we call it building neighborhood economies from within. So rather than looking to the federal government or the state government to come in and sort of do a project here or there, or try to bring in a business from somewhere else, this model is very much about saying, look, the people here already have a lot of talent and a lot of energy, but they don't have the knowledge or the resources to bring their business above ground. So how we do this is a 4-part process that's very comprehensive of training, financing, technical assistance, and real estate. But where it has to start is by connecting with these people in the first place, right? These 90% of who we work with are either recent immigrant or African American or Native American. And our immigrants, by the way, in this city heavily come from Somalia, Ethiopia, Laos in Southeast Asia, and Mexico and Latin America. So we have multiple different immigrant groups here that have come in the last 30 years in huge numbers. But we also have, obviously, a very long-standing African American and Native American community, and we also work with low-income white folks in their neighborhoods. So our first step is trying to connect with these people, and we do that through a set of partnerships with community-based organizations. And these can be anything from a neighborhood group to a church, to a small business group, to an ethnic group. So like the Somali Women's Association of Minneapolis, for instance, or Latino Economic Development Center. So these are institutions in their own community on the ground, small grassroots, where they already have these connections and the trust and the networks. We basically contract with those organizations to host a 12-week training class in their own community. And we have a 12-week curriculum for writing a business plan. So this is sort of step one. Once we've gotten the trust of the people, they sign up to take a class on how to write a business plan for their own business idea. And they do that class in their own neighborhood, in the office of whatever group we've contracted with to do the outreach and to host the classes. We provide the trainers, and we train in 5 languages because of all these different immigrant groups I talked about. And the training is 12 2-hour sessions where you're in a small group of 10 or 12 people learning together. You're all from the same community. You become a peer group. You support each other. But then there's also 10 sessions you can do one-on-one with your instructor. So you can move at your own pace and keep your business idea secret in case you worry someone's going to steal your idea, etc. So that's step one, or we call it the first of our 4 pillars. Step 2 is financing, and you do micro lending, it sounds like, and so do we. In our banking system here, we have what they call the C's of lending. How good is your credit score? How good is the collateral you provide for the loan? How strong is your capacity to repay the loan, etc. And the people we work with mostly don't have good credit. They don't have any collateral to speak of. And they're usually startup businesses, brand new. And so banks won't finance them. And that's why we have our own loan program. And we base it partially on that business plan, but also on character, their own personal character, which is one of the C's of lending in the banking system here. But we use it heavily because the other C's of lending are not present for them. And secondly, because they took this training class, we know their character. We know, did they come to the class? Did they, really develop their business plan, et cetera. And so we do micro lending. And you guys do that too, so I won't go into much detail there. But one of the bigger points in our city anyways, and in our system, is that there's no point in training people to start a business if you can't help them with finances. But there's no point in financing them if you haven't trained them first. And then the other thing we work with them on is called technical assistance. And this is one-to-one, a whole series of expertise that we bring them after they get into business, after they have our loan. And actually during the whole lending process, they can access these experts. So, it can be a lawyer, it can be an accountant, it can be a marketing person, a restaurant expert, a general business expert, management, whatever. And we provide this technical assistance for a while. I mean, it can be a couple of years, and mostly we provide it free. We do not charge for that. We do charge for our classes, kind of a fairly minimal amount, $150, which in our economy is, for a low-income person, it's not nothing, but our cost of our class is $650 per student, so we have to raise the rest of that from other sources. In the lending, we charge 7% annual interest. Now with COVID, we're doing a whole different type of lending product. I can tell you about that if you're interested. We also developed the first in the United States Islamic finance product for small businesses in 2001, a REBA-free way of financing our primarily our Somali immigrants who are Muslim. And anyway, so the three pillars I've talked about so far is the training, the financing, and the technical assistance. And then we have the fourth is real estate. And the two main things we do there, number one is we help these entrepreneurs obtain a lease in a commercial space in their own neighborhood and get financing to build out the space as necessary. But there's a lot of red tape here that they have to go through with the government to get licensed and building permits and designs and whatever. So we help them with all of that, and we help them with the financing and the marketing for their when they open. So that's one thing we mean by real estate. And in that fashion, we can get as many of them as possible to open up in their own neighborhood. And again, start changing the mentality, the perspective of the people in that neighborhood. The other thing we do, though, we do our own real estate development. So we have either built or renovated about 8 commercial buildings in the heart of these low-income neighborhoods, and have about 120 small businesses inside of them. Some are public markets. Some are just retail, sort of, you know, not in a public market type of a design. And some are for small contractors, some are co-working space, some are little offices. But in that fashion, we can also, we can give these people a really good place to run their business, and we can keep helping them when they're in there. But we also then start making a statement in those neighborhoods just visually through what these buildings now look like and function as. So in this fashion, we have trained 6,000 people over these years. We have financed, I honestly don't know, probably 2,000. I don't know the statistic there. And right now we have about 500 people open for business that have come through these programs. And then the other thing we do is work around the United States, which is how we met Herman in Philadelphia. But we have helped about 12 community groups around the different parts of the country replicate our approach to working with low-income entrepreneurs of color in their own community and build their capacity to do that. And we've created a informal alliance or organization we call the Build From Within Alliance. So we're studying how this model works in other cities and other rural communities. And we're trying to also raise policy voice in Washington, D.C., promoting this type of approach. So with that, maybe I'll be done, Ivana, and see if there's questions or comments. And also, anything you can share with me about your work, I would love to hear, honestly.
Well, listening to you, I really enjoyed, and I have to say that I personally had a couple of questions, but I usually restrain myself from asking so that our colleagues can have a chance. So guys, go ahead. I'm sure you found a lot of similar things that you can relate to, because it seems like there are a lot of parallel factors or circumstances that you can maybe discuss. So Nabil, I think Nabil has a question.
وأنا حابب أسأل لو في أو فاضي.
مساء الخير. أنا بشكرك على العرض، فعلا هو
Good
عرض.
evening. Thank you so much. It was brief but impressive. And as Ivana said, we are similar. The programs you do are very similar to ours. I have two questions here. Are you following? Can you get the English translation? So, I'd like to get to know more about the structure for lending in the context of the pandemic, because there were many challenges when it comes to paying back. Also, I'd like to know more about co-working spaces. How do you manage these spaces? Because this is very important. And do you have like a selection criteria? Do you have certain guides? And do people pay to rent these spaces? I want to know more about that. Ivana, let me check. Did he get my translation? Because we have not tested the translation.
Yes, yes.
Okay, okay.
Yep, that worked beautifully.
Thank you.
Well, so thank you for the questions. In terms of our lending during COVID, first of all, we suspended principal payments, and I honestly can't remember right now if we also suspended interest payments, but for the first 3 months, you know, April, May, and June, Some of our loan capital comes from the federal government's Small Business Administration, SBA, and they paid every borrower's loan payments, I think, for 6 months to us, which was nice. Now that's obviously just a part of our loan capital. We have loan capital from a lot of different sources, but that was real important because we earn interest and that supports our operations. And so when we must have stopped principal and interest payments for the first 3 months, and I think we extended it another 3 months. So for 6 months in our portfolio, which is only like maybe 200 loans at the moment, we had no principal or interest payments. And because the SBA paid those loans that were maybe a third of our portfolio, that we got that revenue, and also those borrowers basically got 6 months of free debt reduction. With the other people, I think we're planning to add that 6 months of deferral onto the tail end of their loan term. So just extend the loan 6 months and they can pay us normal payments, but just starting 6 months after COVID started. And we might have to do that again now because COVID obviously is not over. But we also, there was a huge amount of work that we've done with businesses right now during COVID to try to keep them alive. A lot of that was we were the conduit, or we deployed the federal SBA emergency loans and the PPP loans, the Paycheck Protection Plan loans for the federal government. We also deployed probably 500 emergency loans and grants for the state government and our city governments. Some of these products were designed as loans, but then they're partially forgivable. But you still have to document on the front end as you're doing your due diligence and underwriting with their financials, and they have to apply, and a lot of these people don't speak English and don't have good technology. Their books are not online, so that required a lot of on-the-ground, face-to-face work. And now to get some of these products forgiven requires more of that hand-holding. We also created our own COVID response financing product, which goes like this. It's for a business that's been impacted by COVID. It's 50% forgivable, and the other 50% is deferred for 12 months at 2% interest. And it requires that borrower also works with our technical assistance department and experts on how to reposition their business in a COVID economy. So a lot of that has to do with getting these small businesses online, and most of them really did not have much of an online presence, but to survive when the customer can't leave the house, or when the customer can't come into your store or your restaurant. So we've created websites, social media packages, and POS systems for hundreds of businesses now. We also gave small grants to these folks that were, maybe just $2,000 or $3,000. And actually, in some of our own business incubators, we're doing the same. It's devastating what's happening, and the whole notion of grants was never, ever an option. No one ever even thought about it or talked about it. We didn't give grants to small businesses. It was always having to be loans. Well, now that's changed. So people recognize that these businesses can't afford more debt, and these businesses, when they fail, the cost to society is so much higher than if we just literally give them some cash right now to stay open. Sorry about that. I've got a dog and a doorbell and a daughter all converging in my room. Sorry. There's only one bark. That's less than usual. And so we call that reposition your business. The technology that I just talked about, we call that the Tech Pack, which is offered to hundreds of our businesses to get them online, get deliveries going, etc. Then you asked about our co-working spaces. What's sort of, how do we select folks for that, and what is the rent? So in all of our incubators, we call these business incubators, people do pay rent. The rent, the buildings we do are, we basically try to raise money up front for the cost of building or renovating the buildings, so that what the tenants have to pay for is just the operating costs, which still isn't real cheap, but it is affordable to these small neighborhood businesses. And so in the co-working space, we have one that we started just a year ago for small contractors, because one of the industries a lot of our people want to get into is construction or carpentry, that type of thing. They have the skills, but it's a very difficult industry to survive in. So we built renovated an old building, and we're bringing in any of these small contractors who typically just work out of their pickup truck. They have their hammer and their pickup truck, and that's the kind of underground business we try to work with. So now they have a desk, phone. We can bring in training into that space, so that they have construction specific training about how to bid projects, how to do their personnel and HR, how to get paid, how to get insurance. We have all sorts of training we can do right in that building that's specific for their industry. How do they get selected? Well, it's not like there's a line out the door trying to get in right now. So we're looking for them more than, some of them come to our training classes. We have specialized training classes in construction. A lot of this is word of mouth, but we're always looking for the right kind of people. We want them to be, local, low-income neighborhood entrepreneurs. That's who we rent to. So I hope that answered your question, Nabil.
Thank you so much. Yes.
آلاء عندي سؤال ممكن؟ يعني أنا شايفة أولا بشكر.
I'd like to thank you very much for your excellent presentation. I think you face many challenges since the target group are mostly immigrants, I mean not citizens. So And as you said, the red tape is hard, especially harder with immigrants if you want to land or to build. So you have extra challenges because you're not helping American citizens given full rights or full privileges. So when it comes to advocacy, what are you working on other than facilitating the red tape? So what are your advocacy priorities when it comes to the informal economy?
Thank you, Magda. First of all, 40% of who we work with are immigrants. 40% are also African American, 10% are Native American, and 10% are low-income white. So overall, 60% of who we work with are not immigrants. So it's the whole mix, right? And it's the people that are immigrants, again, they come from different places. So some are refugee status. Some are immigrants that came not as refugee status. And then some are undocumented, usually from Mexico and Central America. So the issue of citizenship is not an issue except for that last category. And we do work with undocumented immigrants from Central America and Mexico, but we don't really talk about that publicly. We just do it because they're an asset to our community, in our opinion. And, you know, when they start a business, they pay taxes, even if they might not benefit from taxes themselves. They fill up our vacant storefronts. They hire people. They add to our community. And so that's our attitude. But again, I'll just say this: we have lots of different sources of money for our lending and our training, and we are aware and a little bit careful with what source we use for working with that group so that it doesn't get politically controversial. You know, with the different immigrant groups, there's different challenges. Language obviously is one. And sort of most have come from countries where the economy is pretty different than here. And so there can be a challenge for them to really understand how much paperwork, how much reporting, how much taxes, how much inspections you have to go through compared to, let's say, they came from Mexico or Laos, where maybe they could do informal business legally and much easier, although also at a very, very minimal level. And so, you know, perception and sort of what your experience has been can be a challenge. But there's some huge benefits, obviously. And Ivana and Herman know this. My parents immigrated here just before I was born. My father from the former Yugoslavia, my mother from Denmark. My father was refugee status. And so, you know, this is deep in my life and deep in my heart. The value that these immigrant people bring to our country and to our city is immense. One of the advantages in business that they have often is a built-in market. They have products that their immigrant community wants to buy for food or clothing or whatever, or even like healthcare and, you know, things that require the language, that require the culture, and that mainstream businesses do not provide. And so that gives a huge business opportunity for these immigrant groups to sell tortillas, fresh tortillas that are made every day to the Mexican population. You can't get that at a regular big grocery store here. You can buy tortillas, but they're not very good. Or you could set up a Somali home healthcare business where your employees are all Somali and your customers are all Somali, and you have the language and you have the culture and you have the networks. And so it's a great way to start a business. And then if you want to grow into, penetrate out into the mainstream economy, that's step two. And we help them with that. How do they brand their business and advertise? How do they, add services and add staff and all of that? You also asked, Magda, about advocacy and policy. A big thing for us, especially during COVID, has been really raising our voice at the government level about access to resources for these communities. You probably read that, and maybe it's true in Egypt also, that the first government efforts at bringing money into small businesses during COVID, most of that money went to large businesses and went to sophisticated businesses, went through the banking system. So if you didn't have a bank, if you don't speak English, if you don't have your accounting and your books online with a professional accountant, you literally couldn't even apply. You couldn't even apply for most of those resources. And that's a big thing we have advocated for, is to run more of those resources through groups like ours, who actually have language skills. I mean, we operate, I think, in 12 languages in our office, 35 people, 12 languages. With all these connections into the community and to these different ethnic businesses, we have, and we're not the only group doing that. There's maybe a dozen other groups in our state of Minnesota that do that as well in different ways. So some are just Latino and some are just Somali or Native American or something like that. But that was something we advocated for, was besides running all this emergency aid through the banking system, you should run it through groups like ours. We're a CDFI, which stands for a Community Development Financial Institution. And there's a huge network in the United States of community development financial institutions. We're all nonprofit, and we do lending to people in communities that can't get a bank loan. And so that's been a big thing we've advocated for. We've also advocated to increase the size of our organization so we can face hundreds and hundreds of desperate business owners who are, about to go out of business and lose their whole life savings. You just can't do that with a small staff. And so that's been a second thing we've advocated for, actually all over the country. And we have a pretty good connection into the Biden transition team. Obviously, well, I shouldn't say obviously, but the last 4 years has been pretty tough at the federal level for this kind of work. But we're expecting that to improve now with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris administration. And so we have connections to those transition team and to our own federal delegation, so we can try to get more help for this type of an approach in different communities.
Sorry, there is a little bit of pause because Allah is translating into Arabic and we don't hear it because of this channel. So if you hear strange silence, that's it.
Ivana, Magid, and Suhair have questions. So who would like to go out? This is Magid speaking. Thank you so much for your insightful presentation. And yes, the experience is very similar because we work on integrating the informal economy into the formal economy. Especially, we try to include women. And I want to ask you, when it comes to transitioning from the informal sector to the formal one, a challenge persists because employers or business owners have a set of commitments. Here I'm referring to taxes, to licenses, to permits. So what are the incentives to motivate people to be integrated into the formal sector? I had another question. You refer to the word social networks. Would you please elaborate on that more? What does that concept mean to you? How do you form such a network? Do you refer in this context to value chain and supply chain? Over to you.
Thank you, Magid. So it's a funny question that I used to think about a lot. What's the incentive to go from the informal to the formal economy? And the reason I say I used to think about it is that we've had so many thousands of people year after year wanting to do that, that I guess I haven't thought about that question for a while, but it certainly was a big question when we started doing this, because obviously not having to pay taxes and not having to follow regulations is attractive to anybody in business. And but I think so I guess I'll kind of just speculate a little bit. I think at least, so let's put it this way: people that don't want to do that, they don't take our class, right? And they don't come in our door. And I suppose they are satisfied with the kind of living that they can make staying in the informal economy. And I'm sure it's quite different in the communities you work in. But I think the incentive for everybody that comes into our classes is that they believe they can make more money. I think there's a level of respect that people in a formal business gain from their community that maybe you don't gain if you're just working in your garage or in your basement as much. And I also think, at least here, people worry about getting caught, right? I mean, if you're basically doing everything underground, I mean, most businesses honestly take some money out, and put it in their pocket rather than report it to the government, right? That's sort of standard human behavior. But if all your money is going in your pocket and you report none of it, then that can start looking a little suspicious to the IRS. So you could maybe worry about that. Or if you're operating an like you're fixing cars in your garage without a permit and without the proper zoning. All it takes is one neighbor to call the city government and you'll get a major fine. If you're a cook and you have a little business with food, catering or whatever, and you're doing it in your kitchen, you know, there's laws about that. And, you know, if someone gets sick or if someone reports you to the health inspector, again, you can get in trouble that, you know. So I think there's probably some level of business activity which feels safe in an underground level, but you start to realize that it's not a smart idea if you want to get bigger and actually earn more money and create a decent living for your family, or reach your dream about how big your business. And these are, I mean, believe me, none of these people, or very, very few of these people, think they're going to be rich or that they're going to have like 20 locations. That's not reality. And it's not even a dream for most of them. I mean, they want to sustain their family. They want to have a decent income. They want to be able to buy a house, send their kids, you know, to college maybe, or I don't know what, but it's, you know, it's that level of ambition, typically, not let's go national and become a millionaire fast. So anyway, that's your first question. My answer to your first question. The social network question, what I meant by that was very informal. And it's, you know, it's just the relationship between people, whether through your neighborhood or your church or your schools or your kid's school or your ethnic community. In terms of what we do to build on that, our classes are designed to build on that because our classes are out in each one of these communities. And we limit the size to maybe 10 or 15 people at the most. So they're all from that community. They're all, they tend to often know each other or know, you know, maybe they were related to each other. Maybe they went to school with someone else's mother or whatever. You know, they often usually have connections to each other, and that then builds this sense of peer support, which is, you know, I don't know how you do microcredit in your program, but what I have learned about microfinance programs internationally, the idea of peer support is a very powerful element of the model. And we learned 30 years ago from groups, NGOs doing micro lending in Latin America and in Southeast Asia about the model, and used that knowledge, that learning, in building our program. So the reason we do our classes like we do with 10 people out in a neighborhood is very much inspired by the peer lending model, circle bank, village bank model that we learned about from international microfinance groups.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Before we get to the next question, can I just quickly ask you, Mike, because as you were speaking, several people wrote and asked if there is a PowerPoint presentation, which they really enjoy seeing. And we discussed it briefly before the meeting, but unfortunately there was some misunderstanding. We didn't have enough time to arrange for that. But I'm asking if there are any kind of written materials or any presentations that you might be able to share with us after the meeting, we'll have it translated and share with our colleagues. So just a quick question about that, maybe something just if you can think about.
Yeah, I could send, and we have PowerPoints, you know, we can do PowerPoint. I don't know. I didn't quite catch that.
That's fine. If you have anything available, if you might share it with me after, and I'll arrange for it to be sent to Egypt and translated and
Sure.
it later. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. So Allah, we are ready for the next question. How much more time do you have that you can spend with us also, Mike? So we keep it.
What time is it in Egypt?
It's 8 p.m.
Oh.
See,
What time do you eat?
they are spending their evening with you, so.
I see that. Well, I don't know. I mean, I've got a little bit more time if there's interest in.
Okay. So you are not in a rush to finish like within 5 minutes.
Right. I'm good for a little while.
Okay.
So shall Suhair pose her question because she's been waiting for a while?
Yes, yes, please.
Just like my colleagues, I would like to thank you very much for your presentation. It was diverse, but very similar to what we do. Before posing my question, let me tell you that you look like
Ibrahim.
My manager, Ibrahim Makram. Oh my God.
Thinking
Even
the
your
entire
smile reminds me of him. I
Well, I'm
think
sure
now
he's a
I'm
nice
talking
guy,
to Engineer Ibrahim. هو بيقول
I hope he's a nice guy.
He's wonderful. We all liked him so much.
he is.
Good.
We love him so much.
Well, someday I should meet him and we can take our picture together.
هو بيقول Oh my God, unbelievable.
Yes, yes.
For me, you look like a twin. That's what she says. Now, moving to my question. It's simple. I just want to know more. You said that recently you started using Islamic financing. So if you can elaborate more on that, or if you can send us some material regarding this. You told us also that you work with informal communities or informal neighborhoods, and they started now to improve or to develop. So how do you assess that, or how do you measure that, or how can you say that this is 1 or 2 or 3 manifestations of development, improvement, or progress? Thank you so much.
Well, so first of all, on our Islamic financing product, we launched that in the year 2001 because we had started training in the Somali immigrant community here, I don't know, 1998. And we have a huge immigrant population from Somalia, and they took our class, but then they can't take interest. So in 1999, we hired Wafiq Fanoun, who was on our board. He's originally from Hebron, Palestinian immigrant, and he was on our board of directors. And he helped develop the product first by researching what kind of financing and Islamic financing or Islamically acceptable financing happens in the Middle East, and then brought maybe 10 different methods to us. And the one that we decided we would try is called buy sell. And so if let's say there's someone who wants to cut hair, be a barber, and needs to buy 3 barber chairs, we actually go and buy those chairs as an organization, and then we turn around and sell it to that client, and we can build in a little profit. It's not interest, and it's called profit-based financing. Wafiq Fanoon met with different Islamic scholars here in the Twin Cities and internationally to work on this. You know, and not everybody that we work with finds that Islamically acceptable. Most people do. So there's been quite a bit of interest in that. But some people say, no, I don't think that's acceptable. So, you know, and yes, I can send you some information about that product, but really you should talk, I'm sure you guys know a lot about this already, but Wafiq Fanoon is, I'm Serbian Orthodox, so I don't pretend to really understand too much with our product. We've had quite a few Islamic borrowers, and actually we offer it to anybody. We don't even call it Islamic financing because especially lately, and especially in rural parts of our state, all of a sudden everything gets politicized. And so we just call it profit-based financing. It's available to anybody. And effectively, it ends up costing you the same as a borrower, but it's done in this other manner that is Islamically acceptable to quite a few of our Somali clients here. You asked how we evaluate the neighborhood impact of our work. And I can send you those studies. We get a significant amount of evaluation, and I'm happy to share that with you. So we look at both economic and social impact. Okay, so, and we look at it by neighborhood. And by the way, you mentioned that you have a particular focus on getting women moved from the informal to the formal economy. I didn't mention this, but historically, 50% of who we have trained and financed have been women. Lately, it's more like 60%. But these evaluations will look at economic impact, which includes what's our cost per creating one business, what's our cost per creating one job, how much money do our businesses pay in taxes, how much money do our businesses spend on payroll for their employees, how much do they spend on rent, how much do they put back into the economy? And then we can compare all of that to how much money we spend. I see a little girl there. Hi, sweetie. Um, and so that's economic impact. And then we look at social impact around 4 particular things. One is leadership. So if you are an entrepreneur, you know how to handle money, hopefully. You know how to plan. You know how to treat customers good. You're a valuable leader in your community. So we encourage people to use those skills and get on the board of their school PTA or their church or their, neighborhood recreation center or their business association. So that's leadership. Another one is community gathering places, because in our society, there's a lot of social isolation, and that's not healthy for anybody. It's so much healthier in so many ways to interact and bump into your neighbors and other people on a daily basis. So we particularly emphasize little restaurants, coffee shops, public markets, barber shops and hair salons, daycare centers, places where just by the nature of the business, people are gathering and bumping into each other and talking to each other. So, and that's clearly a driver of health. Another one is on role modeling, because most of the communities we work in have almost no local, indigenous businesses, as I said earlier. So the more people we can get into business and they stay in their own neighborhood, then everybody else in that neighborhood looks at them and says, wow, how did you do that? How can I do that? It becomes an option for, the 16-year-old kid who doesn't have any business in their family at all. And so in our country anyway, you think, well, I can be a sports guy, I can be a rap star, or I can be a gangster. I mean, those are kind of 3, unfortunately, real common dreams of everybody, and they don't tend to very typically have the option presented to them in their community with people that look like them of running a small business. And so that's a big one we're after, is the role model. So, we evaluate those in every 2 years. We pay quite a bit of money to an independent research firm that does phone interviews with hundreds of the entrepreneurs we have worked with and asks them about 80 different questions, including about their own income and how many employees they have and what do they pay their employees, and and again, I can send all this to you. We also have additional research we've been doing on what we call ripple effect. The ripple effect of, if you get 10 or 20 businesses open, say on 3 or 4 blocks, what difference does that make to the rest of the community? Does it ripple out? Do more people want to live there? Do more people shop there? Do more people have jobs or have a better life? Or do their kids go to school better? I don't, So we call it ripple effect mapping. We've got that evaluation. We've got another one on intergenerational impact. So how many have their own kids that now get into business? second generation because of this program. We have another kind of evaluation on community well-being that has to do almost like the social determinants of health, trying to look at a whole variety of factors from a community well-being perspective. And don't ask me what that means because I don't know. This is something we're just starting now. We got a grant from the Kauffman Foundation, and we're doing that nationally. So a lot of this evaluation we do nationally, and we're in 12 different cities now around the United States, and another 4 here in the state of Minnesota. And we're doing this evaluation in most of those also to see how this type of model works in different settings.
While we wait for another question or comment, can I just share my screen briefly to show you your twin from Egypt?
Sure.
I'm really finding this amusing.
I'm going to take a picture of it and show my family. Maybe I have a twin.
Ibrahim was really a dear friend. He's retired now, but I found one picture of me with him while I was visiting Egypt, so you can see the resemblance.
Yeah. You know, that's funny. I have to tell you a funny story. I've been over to my father's land of former Yugoslavia probably 5 times. And one time I hadn't been there in 10 years, and I was being met at the train station in Belgrade by one cousin of mine. We called him Big Brazzo. And I hadn't seen him in 10 years. He hadn't seen me since I was a little kid. So I was probably 20 at that moment. And there was hundreds of people at this train station, and I'm going, wow, I'm never going to find this guy. And then I see this guy who looks exactly like me. And I go, oh my God, it's Big Brazzo. And it was him. Yep, there's
I'm trying to find one more picture. Let me see. Let me show you this one. And he used to dress in a similar way, like the shirt and the.
Well, see, now he's a good-looking man. I don't pretend to be that good-looking.
Oh, there.
He's a good-looking man. All right.
This is how we see you.
Well, the light is helping me here, I think. Thank you.
All right. Back to serious business. Guys, do we have any more questions? Maybe we can wrap up in maybe next 5 or 10 minutes, if possible.
Ivana, there was a question posed in the chat box, but I did not translate that. Should I translate that? Or? Okay. Magda Magid earlier asked about this informal alliance that you formed, and she asked about ensuring sustainability for such an alliance.
Well, you all work for a very large NGO, and so sustainability probably feels different, maybe, I don't know. I started this organization, and we started with me, and I had one telephone in this ear, one telephone in that ear, and one desk, and that was, so I never thought we'd get to 35 people. I never thought we'd be in more than one city. It's honestly like the entrepreneurs you work with. I mean, what the future holds is anybody's guess. We work with groups in different cities that come to us, but we don't work with everybody who comes to us. We're very selective about who we work with. And we basically pick groups that sort of like we pick community partners in our city. In other words, we only work with groups that are really respected and trusted in their city, who have strong networks in the community, but also, you know, are entrepreneurial themselves, who have strong connections to their local government or to some foundations or funders. Each one of them has to hustle their own money. I mean, we're not handing out money over here. So we teach them the model, we keep them connected to each other. They talk to each other constantly. We bring them together twice a year, face to face, except during COVID. But every one of them are, you know, remarkable local community leaders, and they are it's their job to sustain their own model. I mean, our job is the evaluation that you asked about earlier, and training people, and raising the visibility of the model through those methods as a national alliance. I guess that's how we're trying to approach sustainability and growth. We're trying to double in size in the next 3 years, maybe up to 25 cities or 30 cities. But that's going to come if results are there, if we can prove that results are there, and if we can talk about it. You know, if we can really get the attention of foundations, get the attention of government. So we've started writing, we had a opinion editorial piece in our newspaper in Minneapolis a week or two ago. I don't know if you're aware of this, but George Floyd was murdered in our city 8 blocks away from our biggest project called the Midtown Global Market. We have a big public market that's, you know, and then the uprising that happened after that, all the riots and everything, burned down, you know, dozens of buildings right in that area. In fact, within 1 block of our public market, there were 10 buildings burned to the ground. So in our country, we not only have COVID happening, we have this incredibly intense sort of racial awakening, you might call it. And that's on top of the political divide that gets worse all the time. And I know in Egypt and everywhere, everybody has all sorts of intense things happening on the ground. But the things I'm mentioning here have actually elevated the awareness of our work and the value people put on our work. In fact, you asked earlier about COVID lending, but what I didn't say was that we have received a lot more attention and some more financing and funding, because people all of a sudden are waking up to what's life like without all these small businesses. What do our streets look like? Half the workers in the United States work for small businesses, and if they're all closing temporarily or permanently, you know, you get a 50% unemployment rate. The streets look like a ghost town, right? And then we have all the riots and the burning of buildings on top of that, or in the middle of that. It's been a year, and we're all pretty glad it's almost over. But that has elevated our visibility, and we're trying to make use of that in the sense of saying, yes, we need resources now to help during this pandemic and to recover from the social uprising. But believe me, these communities have always needed these resources. These people in these communities have always been left out, and their talent has always been wasted in our society and in our economy. So let's, we're doing our best right now on a policy level and on an evaluation level and on a training level to really try to convince people that this is critical work going forward, and that it deserves a lot more resources and attention to help these small micro businesses. People always think economic development is about a big factory over here and a big factory over there, and hopefully stealing a big factory from your neighbor state. That's fine if that's what you want to go do, but our approach to economic development, just like yours, is building it from within, bottom up. And that now has gotten some more attention and credibility. Honey, how old is your daughter?
Hani?
Yeah.
How old?
It's 3 years old. Her birthday is on December 25th.
Whoa! Happy birthday. Happy birthday.
Luckily, she doesn't live here, so she will not compete with Christmas.
Very, very sweet.
Thank you very much. Sorry, but I don't know where to hide. So, yeah.
No,
Sorry.
it's all good. It's all good. It's a beautiful girl.
She is Gamila.
Camila.
I don't know many words in Arabic, unfortunately, even though I lived there.
Thank you.
Shukran.
Now she's also learning some of the experience we're sharing, so it's good for her.
Yep.
She might end up being the president one day. She's getting ready for community organizing.
We hope so.
She's so happy to be with you because she does not go out due to the pandemic, so she's happy to see some faces on the screen.
Yeah, it's hard on everybody, but especially a nice little girl like her.
She's sending all of this too. May I ask one quick question? Just something that raised my curiosity. If nobody else has a question, first let me ask that.
Go for it. Oh.
Oh, if Allah is translating. Allah, are we okay to ask the question?
Yes, since no response, so I think there are no questions.
I'm curious. So two things, and this is kind of something that was a leitmotif through all our meetings, because we had 7 different groups that we met, and we discussed small business development and financing and so on. And one of the recurring themes was this kind of giving financing based on character rather than, other traditionally used factors to monitor credit worthiness. I'm curious if this is, and I believe maybe our colleagues in Egypt are using, that as one of the strategies as well. I'm not 100% sure, so I'm curious. I guess this is a question for them as much as it is for you, if this is done in Egypt when they are lending to their groups. But then also, is there some kind of systematic way where you still have some approach to how you define this character and how you judge it, because it's so subjective that I'm just curious if you have some kind of policy or some kind of guidance on that your staff applies. So this is question number one. And then just maybe a reflection, because this is another thing that comes throughout the presentations, and it's something that stood out to me. The importance of real estate, and I wonder what is your opinion about that, the importance of owning a property versus leasing or renting. And how does that play as a factor of kind of sustainability of the businesses that are started? And is there, in your opinion, do you have a preference? Would you rather see them kind of buy a property where they are setting up their business, or rent it, or does it matter? And I'm sorry if this is too long a question, so you can skip if there's nothing.
No, it's fine. On the issue of character-based, I'd be very interested. Actually, in general, I would like to know how can I learn more about the work you do in Egypt. And one of those many things I'd love to learn about more is how you do financing and how you assess character. We don't have like a written list or criteria, although it's we've thought about doing that once in a while. We just never got around to it. I think that if we were to make a list, the way we assess it is pretty low tech. In other words, do people learn? Do they listen and learn, or do they come into our class and come into our office and, all they want is the money, and they already have their mind closed on, in other words, do they take advice? I'd say if there's a single thing that I look for personally, that's a big one. And especially before they have our money, if they don't take advice before they have our loan, once they get our money, they're not going to take our advice then either. So, and not that we're always right, and not even that our experts on any given subject are always right. I actually have a little list more in my mind of all the places I've been wrong guessing or predicting how a business is going to do. And it's not a really long list, but I mean, we've obviously lost loans, and we've denied loans where that person went on and started anyway and did great. And so I got my own little list of where I was wrong. But in general, if a person throughout our classes and in our lending process sort of acts like they know everything and we don't know anything, I think that's kind of a turn off. Also, if they're not dependable, if they don't show up when they're supposed to show up, if they don't do the kinds of things they're supposed to do. I mean, a lot of that's understandable with very low income people because they don't have good transportation, they have kids to watch, they don't have a phone that works, or their lives are tough, right? Often. So, but that said, you can't run a business if you can't be dependable. So that's another one. And persistence is a third one. There's nothing easy about starting a business and running it. And then the fourth one for me is doing the things that most entrepreneurs hate to do, which is bookkeeping, and record keeping, paying taxes, you know, the back of the house, you know, late at night on the kitchen table kind of stuff you have to do after your day of work. And Nabil, I see your chat. I would love to hear that. So anyway, that's about as fancy as I think we get on that issue. I wouldn't say we know character when we see it. I think it is more actual criteria like that, but we've never written it down. So yeah, I'd love to see what you have on the issue of real estate ownership versus renting. Yeah, almost entirely our entrepreneurs rent until they've been in business a while, and then some of them go on and buy their building, and we will help finance that sometimes. So we've done that, I don't know, maybe 20 times, 30 times, but mostly, you know, they're barely able to open their business and get it sustainable as a tenant. So what we try to do is help them with a lawyer get a good lease, because they can get in trouble in a hurry signing a bad lease. And the same with if they need a contractor to come in and build out the space, they can get into a bad contract real easily too. So we have pro bono legal help. We have free lawyers that volunteer with us to review leases and review contracts. But down the road, yeah, I mean, if they can buy, you know, if their business is doing well enough and it makes financial sense to buy the building, that's, we'll definitely support that. But that's a minority of who we work with.
Thank you.
So Nabil, I'm picking up on your chat.
I'd like to share our experience in assessing clients asking for loans. We have two models. First of all, we assess people who apply for housing loans through what we call a community committee comprised of leaders of the community who will receive applications and then evaluate applicants to see if they can pay back. Do they really need the loan? And then we conduct a study of the housing of the housing situation, based on which we estimate the cost they need, and then the amount of the loan they deserve. And this is very helpful, because community members are partners in following up with the paying back process. Second, we have another model, especially for micro businesses. This model is different. We use iScore. This is a method now in Egypt. Let me say CEOSS or any other authority can use the national ID of the client, and with this ID you can view all the credit history of any previous loans. So this is like a credit CV or a credit worthiness portfolio. We also conduct a visibility study for the project and a market study, upon which we can give them or deny them loans. This includes the location, equipment. So we have two different models based on which we assess the credit worthiness of our clients for housing or for micro businesses. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nabil. Can I ask a question? So the first method is for housing loans and the second method is for micro businesses, or do you use those methods for both housing and micro business?
They are separate. It's either or, because the clients applying for housing loans usually cannot access banks or cannot access formal financing. So it's all community based. On the other hand, when it comes to micro businesses, we adopt this I-score method through which we can assess the creditworthiness of business owners or entrepreneurs. So two separate methods, each for its own domain or area.
Thank you. So we use that second method. We don't use, I don't know what I score in particulars, but I presume that's a framework for doing that. But we basically do the same thing. So we do a credit check and we certainly study the feasibility of the project carefully. But we know that who we work with will look bad on their credit score. So what we do is ask them, okay, you've got a bad credit score. What happened to cause that? And what are you going to do to improve it over time? If we don't finance them, they can't even start to improve it, but they have to work on improving their credit score right away, and we will help them with that, with credit counseling and even helping them negotiate settlements with people they owe money to, because they can't really be successful in business if they have bad credit, but they can't get started in business if you wait until they get their credit cleaned up, because that can take a few years easily. But maybe through Ivana, we can share a few of our charts or forms for the lending. I'm also curious about the Community Leaders Committee. How do you avoid that being political? By that I mean with a small p. In other words, if I live in a village and there's 10 community leaders, I'll probably know 9 of them, if not all of them, and they know me. How do you keep that a little bit objective or avoid conflict of interest?
Yes. When we form the committee, we bring together representatives of different geographical locations in order to make sure that, geographically speaking, everyone is more or less represented. Second, this committee comprises leaders, credible, trustworthy leaders who are very well connected to the members of the community, in order to ensure that these members know people pretty well. And in Upper Egypt, the area of a village is small and the population is not that big. So the population would be 30,000 maximum. The average number would be 10,000 in a village. So 3,000 households or 3,000 families in one village. Second, after forming the committee, we conduct a series of trainings and then we draft an executive regulation or bylaw to avoid conflict of interest. So no community member can ask for a loan for the same committee that he's member of. He needs, for example, to apply for a loan with another committee. So we have a number of procedures drafted in a bylaw to avoid conflict of interest. The same holds true, for example, if a relative of a community member wants to ask for a loan, then they cannot ask this very committee. Maybe we conduct a specialized study in CEOSS to assess this. So it's a whole process and it's part of the capacity building of this local committees.
Thank you. That's very interesting. We're actually, we have a loan committee that meets every 2 weeks and they're volunteers. But we are right now going to rethink and rebuild that committee. And our feeling is we've had too many former bankers on it and not enough community people on it. And so I'm taking notes here. Nabil, I appreciate hearing about that.
Okay, I think Allah, are you done with the translation?
Yes, I'm done a few seconds ago. Do you want me to ask for final questions or you can conclude now? Up to you.
We could maybe try to bring it to the close at this point, unless there is some very urgent question. But otherwise, I would like to thank Mr. Mike Temali for sharing his time with us today. This was really interesting and engaging, and obviously we went double the time that we had planned for this meeting. So I will say one more time, please, if you have any documents you can share with us, let us share that. We did record this meeting, so I will be sharing that video link with everybody, so you can have it for your records. And again, we are always encouraging a long-term relationships and new partnerships to be formed. So if there are any ideas that come as a result of this meeting for any kind of follow-up exchange, any kind of follow-up information sharing that can go deeper into a specific subject, let us know, let me know. We'll be happy to arrange for another one. If we are able to ever host our Egyptian colleagues in the US, we are hoping to bring them over here to have them visit some of the projects in person once COVID is gone, and hopefully that will be soon. And the same comes for you, Mike. We are also inviting the groups from here to think about maybe possibly visiting Egypt, or continuing to share this international connection, because we are part of one world more and more. So we need to find ways to share our concerns and to look for solutions that can be applied universally. So with that, thank you so much. Thank you everybody in Egypt for staying late and sacrificing your family time. your home time so that you can be part of this meeting. We really appreciate that.
Yeah, I'll just say the same. It's been a real honor for me and a real pleasure. And I would love to stay in touch. I've never been to your incredible country. And it's always been a dream of mine. So maybe we can work on that someday. But thank you so much for your time. Sorry to take you away from your family and your dinner, except for Hani. He had his daughter right there. So it's all good. Shukran. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All righty. Bye-bye. Thanks.
Everybody have a great day or evening.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Ivana. Bye, Mike. It's been a pleasure and honor interpreting for you, Mike. Thank you.
Thank you, Allah.
Thank you, Ivana. Pleasure always.
Yeah. As usually.
Thank you. Yeah.
Always
Bye-bye.
level. To see you, everyone. See you tomorrow again. I think you'll be happy to spend January without me. So a few more meetings and then you can have your evenings back. Bye-bye.